Is gossip ethical? What exactly is gossip? Is there a way to reconcile accountability with privacy? And if so, how do we find the proper balance? All of that and more in today's video. Is gossip ethical? Unlike many of the questions I've covered so far on this channel, even at face value, this question seems difficult to answer. On the one hand, it's commonly recognized that gossip violates trust and unfairly hurts people. Furthermore, encountering constant so-called drama, whether in real life or online, has been shown to have detrimental impacts on mental health. On the other hand, therapists argue that it is incredibly important for people to open up about their trauma, and there seems to be a consensus, across the ideological spectrum, that it's important to hold those who have committed injustices accountable, especially those in the public eye, who are generally expected to uphold higher moral standards. At the heart of the issue seems to be a precarious balance of competing rights. On the one hand, there is the right to reasonable privacy and a justly built reputation. People shouldn't be subjected to unfair levels of scrutiny, especially levels disproportionate to the faults they're guilty of, especially if such scrutiny is the result of malicious ulterior motives on the part of the gossiper. On the other hand, justice demands that those who oppress others should be held accountable, and that those who have borne serious wrongs should be able to testify to the wrongs that have been committed against them, not just for their own sakes, but also for the sakes of anybody else who may become a victim in the future if nothing is done. Whenever it's difficult to answer a question, it can help to begin by defining terms. For the sake of this discussion, let's break gossip down into three categories: rash judgment, calumny, and detraction. Rash judgment involves prematurely assuming another person bears guilt or has poor character on the basis of insufficient evidence. Calumny involves spreading lies about another person that impugn their character. And detraction involves revealing true information about someone's private faults that wouldn't have otherwise been public knowledge. Since detraction will likely be the most controversial of the three categories, let's begin with rash judgment and calumny. Why might these two actions be considered unjust? Well, as mentioned previously, people have a right to a justly built good reputation. We should generally assume the best about people, unless concrete evidence requires us to do otherwise. Here I'll anticipate an objection some viewers might be thinking. That's a great principle and all, and it underlines the principle in many legal systems, that people are innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. A principle that aims to keep innocent people from being unjustly deprived of their freedoms. But is it actually true? What's the philosophical basis for such a right? What stops us from being pragmatic in our judgments, even if they're not grounded in evidence, if it helps the common good? Well, as established in previous videos on my channel, philosophical systems from Thomism to Kantian ethics assert that humans by nature have an intrinsic dignity that cannot ethically be violated. The implications of human dignity cannot be overstated. First, part of the dignity of man derives from the fact that we are moral agents who bear responsibility for the actions we choose. To be held guilty for that which we have not done is to disrespect our integrity as moral agents and undermine the choices we have made by our free will. But perhaps more pressingly, part of human dignity is that we all, without unjust discrimination, have a right to the means of flourishing life. How do calumny and rash judgment impact this? Well, when a person's reputation is tarnished as a consequence of gossip, their ability to engage in social, economic, political, and personal relationships is undermined because they are deprived of the social capital they've built. i.e. the network of connections they've built up over the course of their life, limiting their access to interpersonal cooperation and thereby opportunities for advancement in society. To become a victim of gossip, therefore, is to suffer injustice. And as mentioned in my Civility Matters video, while the common good is essential, it cannot be properly understood in a sense that negates or contravenes the intrinsic good of individuals who comprise the whole. That seems straightforward enough. People's reputation should correspond with the truth of their character. But what about detraction? In the case of detraction, a person truly is guilty of the thing they're being, to use a popular contemporary buzzword, exposed for. Since detraction involves the revealing of private faults, it pays to first outline the difference between faults that are private and faults that are public. Private faults are those which are not publicly known, those that generally occur in personal contexts, which would otherwise maintain the expectation of confidentiality, and those for which harm is limited. On the other hand, public faults are those that impact public interest, societal norms, or the well-being of others, and which should reasonably be known to those impacted. There are several principles at play in the case of detraction. First, justice is meant to be proportional. The punishment meted out for a crime must reflect the gravity of the crime committed. Since detraction often involves private faults that need not be publicly known, are public consequences of detraction a proportional judgment for private faults? Let's consider an example. If a private individual struggles with alcoholism, and those struggles generally don't impact anybody outside of his immediate household, would it be just to bring it up to his employer and post his faults on social media so that everybody he knows becomes aware of his vice? One might argue that such an action would be for the purpose of accountability, and using social pressure to wake the person up to their ethical obligation to change. But is that really the appropriate way to go about doing that? And does it minimize unnecessary harm? I would argue not, since the consequences of detraction are far-reaching and can drastically impair the accused's ability to participate in a normal life, perhaps indefinitely. Furthermore, detraction typically only gives incomplete information that doesn't accurately depict a person's character as a whole. Perhaps circumstances surrounding the action in question alter the character of the actions taken. Perhaps the person did truly commit grave wrongs in the past, but they have since turned their lives around and rehabilitated themselves. In such cases, would the judgment that people have of the individual in question as a consequence of detraction be a fair assessment? Additionally, detraction undermines the right to confidentiality. Well, it's pretty universally understood that the right to confidentiality is not universal, especially in cases wherein public safety is at risk, or there is an obligation to report suspected harm against vulnerable individuals who cannot help themselves. Confidentiality is nevertheless an essential component of social cohesion. Without confidentiality, there cannot be social trust. Confidentiality promotes integrity and protects people from undue and unjust external influence that would seek to prevent them from doing what they believe is right. I mentioned earlier in this video that therapists often consider it important for those who have been victims of trauma to speak about their trauma as part of the journey to heal from it. Why would anybody ever want to open up about something so personal if they didn't trust that the person they were speaking to would maintain confidentiality? That's all well and good, some of you might be thinking. But what about holding people accountable for injustice? What about protecting people from harm? That is a very good question. My response would be that the principles laid out thus far in this video are not contrary to justice, but rather are rooted in preserving it. It is right and just to hold people accountable when circumstances demand it. But there are right and wrong ways to do it. Are you reporting through the proper channels? Are you providing the accused an opportunity to defend themselves, especially in cases where the evidence against them may not be concrete? Would vulnerable individuals likely be at risk of harm if you were to do nothing? Are you motivated by good intentions? All of these are important factors to consider. Calling the police after you witness a crime, reporting an employee stealing money from the cash register to his employer, telling a parent about a crime committed by their minor dependent, talking in therapy about trauma. These things are not properly understood as gossip. Nor is going public with something when attempting to use the proper channels yield no results, such as an employer covering up his employee's wrongdoing. Sometimes it may even be justified to skip ahead a few channels if there is reasonable suspicion that a cover-up would seek to destroy evidence of wrongdoing. But, even still, the point remains that such cases aren't properly understood as gossip, and they don't negate the principles that make gossip, properly understood, unjust. What do you think? Can gossip ever be justified? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell so you can be notified when new videos are released. Also be sure to like this video so that YouTube recommends it to others. If you'd like to support this channel for as little as $1 a month, you can also become a supporter on Patreon. Links in the description of this video. It may seem trite, but words truly do have the power to build up or break down. May our conversations be filled with empathy, and our actions reflect a commitment to justice. Peace be with you. This has been The Philosopher.